Okay, so we're gonna start the countdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, hello everybody, and nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to greet you. My name is Liseth Andrea Muñoz Liscano, and the theme I go to explain that I choose is teaching learning process in the English language. For this theme, I consider that it's necessary to divide this theme in three important parts. First, teaching, second, learning, and finally, English language. We're going to start with teaching. Teaching is a process that consists of transmitting knowledge, norms, and skills. The teaching is to present some theme, and it has an intention, that is to reach a goal of learning. It's necessary to remember that there are teaching goals and learning goals. What are teaching goals? Teaching goals are what will reach the teacher, and learning goals is what will reach the students. There is to say the teaching is a process and the responsible is the teacher. The next is learning. Learning is a process in which skills, knowledge, values are acquired. Learning is the capacity of understand, internalize, and reflect about some theme. Generally, the students don't give a goal, but always it's necessary to reach the proposed goal by the teacher. In conclusion, the learning is a process too, and the protagonist is the student. Next. Okay, now English language. The English language is the universal language because in all parts of the world we can communicate with it. And we must learn English because it is a need. Nowadays, it is a need because it's necessary the communication among everybody. And the human beings need to communicate us because in some occasions we need help, for example, among countries, and every country has their own culture, and our culture has a different language. For this reason, we need one common language, and it is the English. For this, the most of the people in the world learn English. And for this reason, it's very important to have a good process to learning English because this language is a need, really is a need nowadays. Now, there are different teaching approaches to teach English. And there are 5 approaches: traditional approach, natural approach, structuralist approach, communicate approach, and humanistic approach. And every approach has different methods. First, the traditional approach is this approach consists in the teacher has the knowledge and the teacher is an active subject. And the student don't have a knowledge, and for this reason the student is a passive subject. The method of the traditional approach is grammatical translation or translate, and consists to learn words and with these words write some sentence using the grammatical structures. The second approach is natural. The natural approach consists to learn like a child. And in this approach, we have 2 methods, the direct method and the verb list method. And in the direct method, don't translate in the mother language. This is the rule. And the verb list is to generate a need in the context. Now the structuralist approach, all the methods, speech audio, situational, audiovisual, consist in stimulus and response. And we need some strategies like as an oral language. It's more oral language and is less right language. The protagonist is the teacher too, and the important is the grammar, but this grammar is inductive, and it's necessary to learn the vocabulary in a context because here is a significant learning, and the mistakes are fixed fast. Now the communicate approach consists in didactic system, is create new learning context, and we have two methods, the communicate method and the functional notion. The communicate method is interactive, motivating, and fun activities. It's important the daily communication. And in the functional notion, it's important a study plan, like schools, a structure sequence, and with this we can have a good learnings. Now the finally and my favorite approach is the humanist approach. And here there are two methods, total physical response and multiple intelligences. In physical response, the students responds in a physical way and receives these commands maybe in a verbal way. And the multiple intelligence, like music, kinesthetic, interpersonal, linguistic, among others, it's necessary awaken the intelligence, expand the intelligence, and teach with and for the intelligence, and finally reflect a part of this intelligence. Now the learning styles. We have three learning styles: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. The auditory, the students that are auditory or has an auditory style of learning prefer oral presentations, discussions, debates, and the feature is learn easy with the music, for example. With the visual style, these students prefer use images, charts, diagrams, cards, illustrations, and the feature is the auditory students are organized, very organized. And finally, the kinesthetic style prefer to learn with experience, with practice, and one feature is constantly handling with the different materials. Now the conclusions are the teaching process is important because it's the way the teacher helps the students. The learning styles are the ways as the students acquire knowledge, and the English language needs a good process of teaching and learning to understand it. For the reason, these three aspects are unit and develop a good learning about the English. Here I have the bibliographic references, and it's all. Thank you so much.
Okay, Andrea, very good. Thank you for your presentation, just in time. Uh, Only 20 seconds left. So, very good, very organized. We're going to go through the questions and answer part. So, Angelica, Giselle, Aida, Jason, please, cameras on. Aida raised her hand. That means that she's gonna go first with the first question. I think that after this, maybe what you can do also is that you can raise your hands in the participant screen so that we can also have an order to ask the questions. Okay, so Aida, go ahead.
This topic is very interesting for us because it's in focusing our career, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think we should focus on only one teaching methodology or complement the ones we like the most?
Yes, I consider that the teaching process, for example, or the different learning styles is very important in the process of the learning. For this, I consider that it is very important that one or some teacher have a good strategies, a good didactic, and the students, it's necessary that they are with a good disposition to learn. And for this, maybe it's necessary to create a need. For example, if the teacher speak only in one class, only in English, we create a need and the student maybe is more interesting a part of the language.
Thanks.
Thanks for your question.
Okay, I agree. Yes, this is something that as teachers we should know. Very good question, very good answer. Angelica, please carry on.
Andrea, you said that your approach was humanistic. That's the one that you prefer. But I want to ask your opinion about what is the approach that is not useful for teaching English in your consideration.
I consider that maybe the approach, maybe the traditional approach is more using. But for example, in my childhood, I learning English with traditional approach. And nowadays, the teachers using to this approach. I consider that the traditional approach is the more using for the teachers, but in my opinion, it's a mistake. It's a mistake. Maybe some aspects of the traditional approach is important as a discipline. The discipline, I don't know, the disciplina is very important in a class, but is the unique aspect that I result in of this approach. For me, the best approach is the humanistic because we involve different aspects like communicate, like values, the importance, and the more important for me is that the student is the protagonist of the process. And it's true. The protagonist is the student, not the teacher. The teacher is maybe a support, a guide for the process of learning the students, but really the protagonist is the student. And the unique approach that has the protagonist student is the humanistic approach.
Okay, very good answer for a very good question. Giselle, Jason, who wants to go first with the question? Okay, Giselle, go ahead.
Exactly. In my case, I I have the same question, but my question is, what is the approach that you consider most appropriate for the teaching process? Is similar the question
Yes.
for Luz Angelica.
Yes, thank you. Maybe, yes, in my opinion, the humanist approach is the best. However, some partners, some teachers prefer another approach, and this approach it's good for them because the students learn. For example, with the communicate approach, yes, or the with structuralist approach, yes, it's good to approach because, for example, the structuralist is not memorize the grammar structure. No, the best way for this approach structuralist, the best way is to learn a grammar, but in a way inductive. And it is good because the students don't need memorize this structure, because when we memorize some yes, in this case as a grammar structure, maybe we can forget, which is thing we can forget. But yes, in I consider that in the context, educative is context, is the more approach used is the structuralist and the communicate. But I prefer the humanist, and always I try to take a humanist approach in my classes.
Okay,
Okay,
very good.
Andrea, can you share again the topic, the name of topic, please?
Again,
Then the topic, the name of topic.
The teaching learning process in the English language.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay,
okay,
thank you for your question, and thank you, Andrea, for the answer. Jason, go ahead
With my presentation, teacher.
with the question for Andrea.
All right. Uh, uh, do you think um, how can I apply in my classrooms? Uh, have you ever heard about this method that is called response total physical response?
Yes, I consider is very important, but I think that for choose some approach is very important to take in mind the learning style of the students. Because maybe, yes, the physical response, maybe you say, okay, sit down, and the students sit down and stand up with different comments, yes? But maybe if what happened if your students can listen, it's necessary to search another approach. For this, it's necessary, yes, to take in mind the different learning styles.
And how can I manage large classrooms where students they cannot understand the topics easily? How can I manage that? Because in my internship I have found different classrooms, and I struggle with this because my students cannot understand very well the topics I'm giving you. What it could be the best method you advise to me?
I consider that the best way when some student don't understand some topic is go to the games, because the students and I too and we too learn easier with the different games. Yes, for example, some students don't understand some grammatical structure. Maybe you can put the different cards, and we are going to organize the different sentence, take in mind the grammatical structure, the grammar structure. For this, I consider that it's necessary. First, identify what is the learning style of the students, choose an approach, and if we can, if like as a teachers, I can develop the different skills of the students to find or to search another strategies, and the best strategies are the games. For me, are the games.
Sure, that's a very good point because students they are so visual. They learn by watching videos or by playing. But yeah, it's very important to take into account different aspects like, yeah, the different life different learning styles, rhythms, and different needs that they have in their lives because they have a life out of the school. So we have to understand them. But in my classroom, I was the same thinking of you. I was thinking the same because yeah, I was trying uh, to um, to apply, or there are different methods like, yeah, where students can involve in the knowledge, and I tried that, but in large class it doesn't work me. And I was a very bad time there because my students were playing, were fighting, were so dispersed. So I couldn't do my classroom, and my class was really bad because it was really difficult for me to control or manage my classroom uh, when I was um, when I was using gamification in classroom. So that didn't work me a lot. And so my best, I have to I had to change my method, and the method that worked me was like, yeah, design different worksheets and workshops and activities to develop in class. So my students, I explained the topic to them, and my students, uh, I gave them a worksheet, and they started to develop that worksheet. So that was the best way to keep my students in calm. So the gamifications didn't work in me a lot
Yes,
in
that's a
large
shame.
class. but
It's a
but
shame.
yeah, but when I was in a class where I had 5 students or maybe 3 students, that was really, my class was succeed because my students could learn a lot, and they can interact with the knowledge, and they could learn a lot. So in large class, it doesn't work a lot, but in small classes, it is really awesome.
Yes, it's
Yes,
according with the different context.
yes, depending on the context, we have different outcomes, and I understand that sometimes we cannot materialize the class that we have planned. And you can also see that even if we decide to do a specific type of approach for students, the size of the classrooms influences. Even if I am going to do a humanistic or communicative, yes, a direct approach, a natural approach, whatever, the amount of students is going to condition the outcome most of the times. Good questions. We almost got a debate. It was supposed to be 5 minutes. There's already 10 minutes of questions, but that means that the topic is interesting. I am going to ask a question to Andrea
Oh,
so that we can wrap it up. It's a very simple question because it's an opinion from you. Yes?
mhm.
Taking into account that we are studying online and that we have to learn some things about technology. Yes? Which of those approaches do you think suits better? It's more useful when using technology. Imagine that you're here learning English online. Yes. Which of the approaches do you think it's better to learn through education, to learn through technology? Sorry.
Okay, I think that depends of the manner of to the way of the class, because for example, this class is I don't know, the focus of the class is speaking and listening, and in this case the approach is communicate. But maybe at UNAD, when we must deliver different words, it's with guides, with different guides, and it's complicated. Maybe I think that the approach for this environments is natural. It's natural, because it's a lot of autonomy, and in this case the natural approach is autonomy. It's really autonomy, and we have a need in our context for this. Is a natural approach, specifically with the method Berlitz, because we have a need in our context, and for our good, I don't know if it's good, our good, it's necessary don't translate or to try of understand the difference questions of the guide. For example, translating in our mother language, it's necessary interpret, reflect, to try write, redact. Yes, writing. For this, I consider that in this cases is natural approach. But when we have some these environments, it's communicate. It's the according with the TICs at UNAD, we have different approach because we have different environments.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your questions, everyone. I think that the same goes for Andrea as well as the rest of our classmates who have presented. The use of the slides was accurate because we have information that is needed for a context, but it doesn't mean that Andrea is going to be reading directly from the slides, which is something that you have to take into account whenever you're presenting, and especially when it's a webinar, because it's supposed to be you basically having a conversation with an audience, presenting some ideas and then listening to what they have to say. In that sense, very good. The topic is really interesting. As Aida said, this is something that all of us need because it's part of what we are going to be doing, right? So thank you very much. Very good. I am going to stop recording. Jason, yes, tell me.
I have another question to
Oh,
Lisette.
Okay, let's keep it short. Okay, Jason, you can ask the question, but let's keep it short because we have to continue and we have 10 minutes of the session, and also there's two people missing. Okay.
Right, sir. How can a teacher on influence in the students' learning process?
okay. Depends of the context. Because if in some contexts I choose use the different approach. For example, in the traditional approach, if I a traditional teacher, the protagonist is the teacher. Yes, and that is to say, the role of the communicate community of student teachers depends of the approach. The role of the students and the teacher depends of the approach. In the majority of the approach, the protagonist is the teacher. Less in the humanists. In the humanists is the unique approach that the protagonist is the student. For this, it depends of the context, the learning styles. There is to say, in conclusion, depends on the approach that use the teacher.
Okay, depending on the approach, we can influence in the learning process. Very good. Okay, so let's carry on. I would like you to give me a 2-minute break.